Hi everyone, thank you so much for getting up early to hear me speak. I, first of all, would just like to thank all of you for being here, but I also want to thank most of all AIGA for putting on this wonderful conference, particularly all the AIGA staff who've made this happen. I personally have been so entertained and inspired with everything that's happened so far, and I'm truly humbled to be up here today. So, just to tell you a little bit about me, Roman mentioned some of it, but I'm actually from California, but I've lived in London for 15 years now, so I think that makes me a Londoner. I trained as an architect and urban designer and have worked in the US, in Finland, and in the UK. But what really drives me is the potential of design to positively impact society, and it means a lot to me that that's a big commitment that AIGA has as well. That's me with my first building, and I think it'll become clear when I talk about some of the things that I'm talking about today, the need to reuse materials and the need to move us to a circular economy. I actually built that from things I found on the railway tracks outside my house, which is another, I don't know why my parents let me walk around on the railway tracks to get all the things, but they did, and there you go, so I'm very proud of it. As Roman said, I work for the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce. Quite a mouthful, so we go by the RSA, but actually I think it's important to talk about that full title because it's really about design. When we were founded in 1754 in the Age of Enlightenment, there was no design. It was about arts, it was about creative practice, it was about manufactures, how you actually make things, and it was about commerce, how do you bring something to market. And so in 1754, this organization was thinking about how do we use these things to build a better future for all of us? What is our role in that? And the RSA has had very famous members, including Charles Dickens, Benjamin Franklin, and Karl Marx. And these are all people who were committed to the mission of the RSA. So today, we talk about ourselves in terms of a 21st century Enlightenment organization. I was really mesmerized by Mimi's presentation yesterday, and she talked a lot about creativity and curiosity, and these are things that the RSA is all about. Our mission is to enrich society through ideas and action. We are committed to the fact that human beings all have creative capacities which need to be mobilized and supported, and together we can all deliver a 21st century Enlightenment. And this goes to something that Rick mentioned yesterday as well, which is community, and that's something that I'm going to keep coming back to. So creativity, curiosity, and community are things that really mean a lot to the RSA and what we're committed to. And that image there on the right is a still from one of the RSA animates. I don't know if people are familiar with that series. If you're not, I would encourage you to go onto YouTube and to check it out. It's a series of animations from our public events program, which is very similar to TED Talks. And we animate those key ideas, such as Sir Ken Robinson talking about creativity and education, or Danton Pink talking about drive and motivation. And we animate them so that we can get those ideas out to the most number of people as possible. So accessibility to big ideas is also what the RSA is committed to. So I run the Rsa Design Team. So we are not an in-house design team in the traditional sense. In fact, we are actually what I would call design advocates. So my role is to articulate both to my colleagues, but also externally, what the role of design can do and how it can provide us with a better future. So we are an action and research team focused on articulating, understanding, promoting, and applying design thinking to today's most pressing social challenges. To that end, the major endeavor is the RSA Student Design Awards. This is a global curriculum that I write and I run, and I'm very pleased to say that AIGA has been a supporter of this program and is helping us to spread the word to students in the US. So if you'd like to hear more about that, please come talk to me later. But it's not actually why I'm here today. As much as I would love to tell you about that program and how we can encourage young designers to engage in social design, I'm actually here today to talk about redesigning the future. But I want to start with the past. So this is Citizens' Advice Notes, which was published by the National Council for Social Services in the UK in 1942, so right in the middle of the Second World War. And this book told people how to reuse materials and all the things that they would need to do in a period of wartime rationing. This was published in the UK, but I think that the War Protection Board, the Office of Price Administration in the US were issuing similar advice. Here's a page from the Citizens' Advice Notes. Talks about how we need to salvage waste paper, reuse it, we need to salvage rags, ropes, and string. It was actually a criminal offense to discard a piece of string. Look how far we've come. This is today. We are burdened by our stuff. We are buried alive by our stuff. We watch television programs about it. We watch television programs about people are hoarding, and this is inconceivable in the wartime mindset that actually you would never buy, consume anything that you didn't have an actual need for. So how did we get here? Well, we live in an increasingly consumer society, and dramatic increases in demand for resources, both fueled by growth in our own market and emerging markets, have actually triggered higher and more volatile commodity prices. All of our resources are currently in the stuff that's already there. So for every ton of household waste we throw away, there's another 5 tons of material that's actually gone in to make that itself. So it's not just the material that's in the products that we have and we consume, but it's actually all the energy and other materials that went into creating those products. So here's just some key statistics for you, but the really shocking thing is that 90% of all products are waste within 6 months of purchase. This is a table of the critical minerals that are in all of our stuff, and this is the supply risk to those minerals. Red and orange indicates there was an alarmingly small amount of those minerals left. The reality is we're at a tipping point. There's going to be nothing left very soon. But it's not just the physical, quantitative supply that's at risk, but actually the concentration of where those minerals exist that goes into all of our things. All of these minerals are subject to the policies and regulations of the different countries where they're from, and so that actually creates another problem. So this is a picture of someone mining for tantalum. Tantalum is a mineral that comes from coltan, which 65% of the world's coltan comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. As some of you probably know, the DRC is ravaged by a civil war fueled by demand for this mineral. Tantalum and coltan are in all of our mobile phones, our cell phones, our electronic gadgets. There's a huge demand for this. Our demand for the next gadget is fueling this civil war. We have to think about this on a global scale and what our habits are doing. So that's what's in our stuff. But what about when it comes to the end of life? So e-waste, electronic waste, that's anything that has a plug or a battery. At present, around 27% of e-waste in the US is recycled and around 30% in the UK. So that actually doesn't sound that bad, but when you consider just how much e-waste we're actually producing, that's huge numbers, millions and millions of tons. We can always do better. And only 3% of cell phones are actually recycled, and another 44%, and I'm sure we can all testify to this, sit at home in a drawer because we don't know what to do with them. We want the latest thing, so they sit there, and we're not sure how to get rid of them. And this is a huge issue. This is a huge resource that is untapped. The amount of minerals that are sitting, critical minerals that are sitting in those products that we've already produced but aren't using. And so the 3% of mobile phones get recycled, 30% of generally e-waste, but then another 54% of e-waste actually goes to what I call unscrupulous recyclers. These are so-called recycling companies that are gathering e-waste and then sending it to the developing world, countries like Lagos. Lagos in Africa actually receives 500,000 laptops and computers a month, which are then burned under the pretense that those materials are being recovered, but actually the process is incredibly dangerous. Again, demand for the next new thing is fueling bad things happening in these places, and we need to be aware of it. Part of the problem, I'm sorry to say it at the moment, is design. Approximately 80% of the environmental costs of a product are predetermined at the design stage. Designers have to be aware not only of the beginning of life of a product, but the end of life, and this is what the project is all about. So this is our current model. This is our current linear economy that we operate in. We take raw materials, they go to a factory, they get branded, they go to a consumer, they become waste. That's the way that we currently operate. We have to move to a more circular economy. Likewise, we have a very linear model of who's involved at each stage of the process. So this is what we're working towards. We're working towards a way where we can actually see that materials are not only recovered but reused. We need to think more about repair and refurbishment and remanufacture of our products. This is what we call the circular network. So this is a map of everyone that's involved in creating products and manufacturing things that we use every day. So there's lots and lots of people in this and lots of industries, and I'm not saying that this is an easy thing to do. Actually, this is a very complex job and will take many years, but one that I believe that we really must work on if we're going to be successful in this. And design actually has a huge role to play in this. All disciplines need to be involved in this. This isn't just for product designers to think about or transport designers. Everyone, regardless of design discipline, needs to start to think and ignite their curiosity about what their role is in moving us to this circular economy. So why don't we connect designers with resource managers, for example? Why don't we get designers to better understand materials and material recovery, going to landfills, understanding why things are discarded? And that's exactly what the RSA is trying to do. The RSA has set up a project called the Great Recovery. Recovery meaning the recovery of the materials and elements that are in all of our stuff already. And it's about community. It's about igniting curiosity in designers and connecting them with others to find out how things work and actually moving us to that circular economy that we so desperately need to. We take designers and we take them to waste facilities and end-of-life facilities. There's a huge resource of all of these plants out there that I don't think many designers know about. They don't know that what happens to the products and things that they design at the end of their life. So we then ask people to take things apart because actually it's really good to understand why people throw things away. Oftentimes we throw things away because one small thing broke and we weren't able to fix it, we don't have the know-how, and so this is really important. We have to understand why people are throwing things away and if there's something we can do about it. There's also the really onerous craftsmanship side of all of this, if that's the right word. So complex products like laptops or flat screen TVs, they all have a complex fluorescent tube, a CFL inside them that's about the size of a pencil. So those products can be recycled, but they need to be melted or crushed. But actually the first thing that happens is that someone by hand has to remove that fluorescent tube. This is a design flaw. We need to redesign this so that this doesn't happen, so that we can make this process easier to recycle our products. And even simple products, this is somebody taking apart a toothbrush, not even an electronic toothbrush, a regular old toothbrush. You would think that's entirely plastic. It's not. Actually, there's metal pins inside a toothbrush that hold those nylon bristles in place. When you have different materials in one product, you can't recycle it in the normal way. You have to then disassemble it in order to recycle it. These are all issues that we need to address. Shockingly, a lot of products actually go against the recycling process altogether. This is a plastic bottle recycling plant. Plastic bottle recycling is something that we're all familiar with, and actually probably most of us would say we do very, very well. It's something that we're accustomed to, and most people know what can be recycled and what can't. But actually, people who recycle plastic bottles have to deal with huge variations in the quality of the local recycling schemes, which are usually set up by waste services, local waste companies. So even within one batch of recycling, there's a huge amount of variation in terms of the materials that are in that recycling and then what can actually be recycled effectively. So if you take the example of milk bottles, none of us wants to buy a recycled milk bottle if then the bottle has a murky look or it's a bit greenish. And so we expect that as a consumer, that our bottle will look clean and hygienic. But actually, for a recycled bottle, that's a huge amount of resource and high cost and high tech equipment that they have to invest in to get that coloring out. So why don't we go back to the earlier phase where they're collecting the bottles that need to be recycled and actually create something that's not at this stage where they have to compensate for the inadequacies of flaws in the service design earlier. And this is all the kind of thinking that we want to encourage. It's about understanding the whole chain and how we can actually make things better across the whole piece. So we run workshops, and we ask designers to take things apart, as I said. We ask them to write down everything that's in a particular product, and then we look at all the breadth of the minerals that are in those products themselves. Take a plastic spray bottle. So again, you would think this is a very simple product, but look at the sheer number of components in this one product. All plastic, except that there's a metal spring in there. That metal spring has to be removed by a magnet before the whole product can be recycled. Again, this is a design flaw. Why don't we start thinking about redesigning this system so we don't have these challenges and we can actually recycle things and reuse things more easily? So this is who needs to talk to who in the circular network in order to make this happen. As I said, this is not easy. I'm not standing up here saying this is easy. I'm saying that this is about the community of designers and everyone coming together. But this is what the Great Recovery is all about. It's about people talking to each other and igniting that curiosity about why things are the way they are to create new opportunities for design. So design is really one leg in this trifecta of materials and material recovery, material streams, waste streams, and all of this brought together through our project, The Great Recovery. Just a couple of weeks ago, we took a group of designers to a dump in London, and we asked them to look at why people were throwing things away. Again, all of that, why are people discarding objects and products if there's just one small thing wrong with them? We all do it, I think. It's part of our nature and part of the consumer society that we live in. We're consuming so mindlessly and throwing away so mindlessly, and we have to start to think about this if we're going to set things up for the next generation. We also take them to textile recycling facilities, and then we ask them to come back to the studio and to start thinking about how do we design out waste, and that's ultimately what this is all about. The project is called The Great Recovery, and that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're all designers, but also all of us are consumers. So what is the role, what can a consumer do now before all those strings of people talk to each other?
Gosh, that's a tough question. You know, I think it's going to sound cliche. I think education is a huge part of this. I think if you're a designer or not a designer, as Roman said, we're all consumers, and we have to be more mindful of the decisions that we're making and try to understand, do we really need the latest thing? And I'm not advocating that we don't buy anything, but it's actually about being more mindful of what we actually need, because we are at a moment where we're running out of these minerals, and there's so much untapped resource in the stuff that we already have. We recently did a project around sofas and mattresses, and actually they all come with that fire hazard sort of tag on them and stuff. And I think a lot of people cut them off. And actually, if you cut that off, those things cannot be recycled or resold by charity shops and those sorts of things. So it's kind of about understanding all the components in the decisions that you make and want when you buy a particular piece, understanding what's going to happen to it at the end of its life as well. So.
But I mean, other than it saying do not remove under penalty of law, I wouldn't have known that. So there's a real opportunity there. I mean, that's what, yeah. I mean, this is upsetting to see all that trash, but there's good news, there's good work to be done.
Yeah, I think Roman and I were talking about this earlier. I think I often fear that I sort of just set up this horrible picture that it's all doom and gloom and we're all just destined to live in a pile of rubbish. But
great, everybody. See you later.
And I'm not, like, things are bad. Things are really bad, and I think we're in a situation where it's very easy to to just put it out of your mind. I think when we discard something, a toaster, a blender, a microwave, all these things, we sort of think that it's out of our lives and therefore it's not our problem anymore, but actually it is our problem. And I guess it's just being more mindful of the things that we're buying and understanding what's going to happen to them at the end of their life. And that's something that we want designers to understand when they're making design decisions, but also consumers to think about when they're buying things. And yeah, so education is really important in all of this.
Who are the good actors in the space? Who's doing this well?
You know, I think that actually the maker movement is it's going to be a really big contributor to sort of seeing us shift to a more circular economy, because as we start to make on a more local level, and also the maker movement has meant that people start to understand how things are made better. And so that's really important. And there's lots of little outfits, I know, across the US and in the UK and in Europe, people who are actively trying to repair products and kind of get people to return to that middle of the 20th century idea that actually you don't buy something new. If the plug's broken on your lamp, then actually you can fix that. And it's a pretty simple thing to do. It requires a little bit of your middle school electronics classes or physics, but
that's not where I went to middle school.
I went to a technical school.
I'm hopeless.
Actually, this isn't hard, and I think the reality is that this is a huge opportunity for design. This isn't all doom and gloom. This is actually really exciting as designers to be able to look at all of these challenges and start to figure out how we're going to address them.
And the fact that you couldn't throw away a piece of string during World War II was because there was a book of laws that said you couldn't. Is it going to get to that point, do you think? Do you think it needs to get to that point for this to be really effective?
Probably yes. I mean, some countries, I think the Netherlands is doing a really good job of trying to make some of this stuff into law. And on that big wheel, obviously part of this is public policy and law, and we do need those players to be part of this. But the designers need to be empowered and have the understanding to start to talk to the manufacturers and make those changes as well. And it needs to come from all sides. But yeah, I mean, public policy and law is going to have to be a part of this.
Yeah, I think so. But if we want to get ahead of it, I think designers have the opportunity to get way ahead of this before policy gets ahead of it, which is really key. So what is the culture of a 261-year-old organization like? I'm just curious about that.
It's weird to work for an organization that's 261 years old. It's incredibly old. It's very hard to be seen as forward-thinking, as you can imagine. But actually, the organization has always been forward-thinking. If you think about, as I mentioned earlier, people like Karl Marx, Benjamin Franklin, Charles Dickens, who were all part of this organization, and who would come to London and sit around and talk about what are the ideas that are going to change the world. And we would say now, for example, we would talk about open innovation challenges and crowdsourcing ideas, and that's something that I'm working on at the RSA as well. The RSA has been doing that for 260 years. They just didn't call it that at the time. So if you take the example of in the 18th century and even into the 19th century, children had to climb up chimneys to clean them because children were small, chimneys were only 14 inches wide, so we didn't have any child labor laws. So the RSA said this is a problem. Children aren't going to school, and children are often falling down from the chimneys and dying from those injuries. What are we going to do about this? And so they set an open innovation challenge. It was called a premium. And they said, we need to solve this. And someone invented the retractable chimney brush. And that actually set us on a course where we no longer had children climbing up chimneys. And that kind of thinking is really, really powerful and something that has been a part of the RSA for its whole life. And that's something that I often refer to because I often speak to students about the role of design. And I want people to understand that design is more than just the thing itself. What is the context in which it lives and operates, and how can we see the bigger picture? So.
That's a great design challenge. Maybe we can get the Command X on that.
Yeah.
How do we stop kids from going inside of chimneys? How did you get into this? So you said you were an architect. How did you fall into this stuff?
I was trained as an architect. I went to architecture school, and then I did go to a program in Chicago. Some of you might have heard of it, called ArchiWorks, which is a program all about public interest design, and that really ignited in me a desire for design for social impact. But so did that. It was a one-year program, and then I went and I needed just a job, a salary, and I worked as an architect for 10 to 12 years, and then the crash happened, and there were no jobs in architecture. And I lost my job, and at that time I thought, well, this is a real opportunity for me to reflect on what matters to me, and I went back to that idea that I saw a bigger role for design. And I was lucky enough to get a job at the RSA, running the Student Design Awards and sort of being this design advocate. And to be honest, I think I'm better at that than I ever was as an architect.
Well, it's good to discover about yourself. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Sevra Davis.
Thank you.